So there we go.
Yeah, here it is.
So, rewinding. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Can everyone hear what I'm saying right now?
Not very well.
Not very well. Do I get to do the stand-up comedian thing? Hello. Can you hear me now? Now. Okay. Can you read that? Can you read that? No? Let's see if I can remember. See, it's like the two-handed. I'm doing a code demo, and I'll just speak louder. How about that? Let's see. We'll burn this bridge when we get to it. All right, so the name of the talk is Code Analysis for Unit Testing. I'm Paul Mitchum. That's me right there, Paul Mitchum. Mile 23 on Drupal.org. I tweet at Paul Mitchum. I gave this talk at Sandcamp a few weeks ago, and I'm going to give it now at MidCamp, right there. Let's check off the checkbox. I wanted to be sure and give some community shout-outs. I'm part of the Seattle Drupal community, and we have two things to talk about. One is the CDUG, which is organizing the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, which will be in Seattle this year. And then Seattle PHP, which is organized by one of the Amazon guys. They're organizing Pacific Northwest PHP, which the call for proposals is, the deadline's in a few days. So if you want to come out to Seattle and give a talk, that's where you got to Google that. So I need to remember to ask you guys, anyone here participated in a Drupal.org project? Like an actual project? Core issues? Core developers? And have you reviewed a patch for Drupal 8? Anyone reviewed a patch for Drupal 8? Yeah, that guy. If you've reviewed a patch for Drupal 8, then yay, you're my hero. Okay. So here's what you'll understand after this talk. You'll understand a structured process for code quality analysis and improving maintainability. I'm a little nervous right now. Hopefully that will pass. Metrics for understanding the effectiveness of the process that we've just applied. And yeah, that's what you'll try to understand, I hope. The reason we're analyzing code is because for the purposes of this talk, we've been assigned legacy code to maintain, and we have no familiarity with the code or its purpose or structure or anything like that. Someone said, here, take care of this code. So we have to sort of dive our way into it to understand it and do our job of maintaining it. So here's a question. What do I mean by legacy code? All code is legacy code. People think of legacy code as old, smelly, dusty code that needs a bath and that's unmaintainable, etc. But that's just today's code tomorrow. So the destiny of all code is to become legacy code. What do I mean by maintainability? The ease with which you can understand the code, and then the ease with which you can evaluate a change to that code. So you have to understand what it is, and you have to figure out a way to evaluate how changing it will change it and everything around it. So here's a couple of maintainability user stories. We have a newbie who's just new to the project, and so he's relying on documentation and first pass test analysis and all that kind of thing. We have a maintainer who has to evaluate patches or pull requests, is going to rely a lot on whether the tests pass or the relationship they have with a person who's presenting the patch or the code. And then there's the genius who can understand everything but can't tell you what they mean because but can't explain it effectively. Or this is the hit by the bus scenario. So if someone is in your project who knows everything and they're hit by a bus, the project kind of is done. Relies on no one, and this person does not exist or shouldn't. So in order to increase maintainability, here's some rules of thumb. We're going to establish a metric for risk of change, because remember we're looking for a way to come up with a number to tell us what it is that the change will cause us. And so, yeah, if you can read code, you can maintain it. This is a rule of thumb. So if you have a very sort of non-complex code, you can read it and you're done. You don't really need to worry too much about analysis. If you have tools available to help you analyze code quality, then those are available to help you maintain code without reading it, so you can do all kinds of analysis based on whether tests pass and coverage and et cetera. And if it's but you can also read it, right? So, and then if it's really complex, then you are going to rely a lot on those tools, and that's mainly what I'm going to talk about. Is you need the tools because you can't read the code because it's complex, and you need test and coverage in order for this to work. So I made this slide. I was giving this talk to some friends of mine to try to rehearse it, and I said, so my big idea is, and they said, no, you should own it. You should put your name on it. So it's Mile 23's big idea is that you analyze something, that leads to an expectation. You then write down the expectation as a test, and then running the test allows you essentially to reanalyze the code without being there. And if you write the tests, you will know things, and if you don't write tests, you won't. So you won't be making assumptions about the code. This didn't seem like all that big an idea, but my friend said, yes, it's your idea, so you should name it, and you should draw a picture of it. So here we have, oh, my mouse pointer went away. So we have analysis. We create some expectations based on our analysis. We write a test that sort of expresses our expectations, and then we can use the test to measure. And we can also use the test to generate analysis, generate code coverage, crap numbers, etc. And we can then use that process in order to do code analysis, to maintain code, and for other processes that we can think of, because we now have a process in place. And so I got to thinking about it, and this is just the scientific method. It's the same as observation, hypothesis, experiment, and falsify, reproduce. And we use that to understand the universe, which in this case is the code we're set to maintain. Hoping for a bigger laugh there, but so what tools do we have to do this? We have PHPUnit. In Drupal 8 we have PHPUnit built in. We can also use it in Drupal 7, etc. And for just about every other PHP project, it's pretty much the standard. We can use it for validation and sanity check while we're writing code, and we can use it for regression tests and so on and so forth as we run the tests against our code later during maintenance. But we also have things like PHPMD, which is a mess detector, and then I'm going to talk a lot about PHPUnit coverage and CRAP, which is how you measure code quality in aggregate without trying to read it. So, that preamble out of the way, our mission is get text. We have inherited Drupal 8's get text library as legacy code, because it is. So we have two assignments. The first is we're going to figure out what's the scariest part of get text, and the second assignment is to mitigate the scariness. So we're going to take away the risks as much as we can without really changing the code, because we're trying to analyze. That's the title of this talk. So we're not really going to change the code. We're going to mitigate the risks. Yeah. If you don't know what getText is, everyone here familiar with the T function in Drupal? Anyone not familiar with T in Drupal? So T works by substituting some strings out for their translations. So we would, if we, oh, my mouse pointer is back now. We would translate this, whoops, not that. We would translate this string right here. So it reads in the translations, the string literals from a PO file, which is a portable object. It's kind of a standard way to do this. There's a lot of implementations of getText, including the native one in Drupal, and if you look at this issue right here, you'll see that getText suffers from a little bit of lack of love in Drupal. This issue is from 2012. It really hasn't been updated. It says, what are we going to do about this? And I'm not saying this in order to pick on getText. I want to be very clear. There's people who are in charge of the translation system and who are doing multilingual stuff. Not picking on them. It just was something that came up in my research, so I decided that this talk would be about it. And again, down here at the bottom, note, not advocating actually replacing Drupal getText, but it's an obvious question, so we just pop it out for another dependency. Should we take this library and give it, put something new in instead, right around that? But we don't have a way to evaluate that, because I'm sure that most of you here have never even looked at the getText code. Anyone here looked at the getText code in Drupal 8? It's also in Drupal 7, I think, in a slightly different form. So we are all, pretend that I don't know these things, but we're all noobs to getText, right? So we don't have a way to understand even whether we should replace it with another library, proudly invented elsewhere. We don't know if we should do that. So, look, live demo. So one thing we can do is we can run the tests. We can go to core, this should be bigger. And we can say vendor PHPUnit, and we can then hit return. Well, no, we can't. Vendor buying PHPUnit. And these runs the tests and tells us that it all works. At least it should. Boom. Pretend that's going to take a while, so pretend that's happy. We can also say group getText, because in Drupal 8, the PHPUnit-based tests are all organized by groups, such as and the groups are the namespaces that they live in. So getText. I think there's one test. There's a few. So, okay, there's some tests and they pass for this giant library we've inherited. Here, let's look at it actually. Here, let's go on to this. So this is a coverage report that I generated for, that needs to be bigger too. Can everyone see that? Okay. So this is a coverage report for PHPUnit. You can generate one of these by just saying coverage HTML, and then give it a path. We're not going to do that. It takes a while. But you end up with this little static site like this, and you can drill down into the various files, directories within core Drupal. So here it is. This is Drupal 8, as seen by a coverage report. The modules directory is included because examples is in there. Look at that. So we're going to go into core, lib, Drupal component. Component is a namespace in Drupal for various libraries that are decoupled from the rest of Drupal. So the plan actually is to take all of these little directories here and turn them into their own Composer installable projects. But I'm not here to talk about that. So here we see what a coverage report looks like, and we are concerned with getText. Because some arbitrary person said, you must maintain this. This is the coverage report for all of the getText classes. There's a bunch of interfaces that aren't represented here, but that's okay. And you'll recall that our assignment, mission getText, is to determine project risks. Well, what do you know? There's this dashboard thing right here. This might help us to understand project risks. It's almost like I wrote this talk. So given this, we can use this crap number, we can use this coverage information, we can use all this stuff to look right here and see this crap number. So crap is an acronym. It stands for Change Risk Anti-Pattern. It's generated by the coverage report during the reporting. And it's what it is is it says that your method or class has a high degree of cyclomatic complexity versus how much coverage it has. So we can look at this class and discover that it has a very high complexity, but low coverage. As we can see here, low. It's all red. So we're trying to determine what it is that's the biggest risk. Very clearly, our crap number tells us here, 5402 for post-stream reader. Glad that didn't change in the last week. And here's read line. We can look at by method. What's our riskiest method as opposed to what's our riskiest class? Read line is a risky method with its own crap number of 2070, which is very high compared to 2 digits for everything else in this namespace. And so this gives us a clue that yes, we have satisfied determined project risk. Looks like read line. Read line happens to be in the post-stream reader class, which is why post-stream reader class gives us such a high crap number. So let's look at post-stream reader. 0 coverage. And here we see again the same information. We have by functions and methods, kind of a pass-fail per method. Over here we have lines, so we have percentage of lines covered by tests. This is kind of odd because there should be one for set header that I was going to show you, but I just generated a new coverage report, and what do you know, it's not there. Let's look at something else. Po header. This is a different class. I wanted to show you what it looks like when you have some coverage. So if we go down here we can see that parse plural forms has some coverage. I'm not expecting anyone to really read this, but you can see that in this report, if you hover over a line, it shows you which tests cover that line. There's a lot of different ways to visualize this information. There's a bunch of tools out there to do it. This is one of them. I like this because it's just easy to do. We have on the right side, I can't really move my mouse pointer to point at the thing because it goes away, but we see that there's a test for this particular line, which is po header test with the test plurals formula test method, and it has 12 data sets. Who here is not familiar with writing a test in PHPUnit? Okay, so like a third or something maybe. So I gotta talk about all this stuff that I'm talking about. But the point of looking at this particular window is that you'll see that there's some lines that are not covered. So we have tests that shove in data to this method, which the data then causes the code execution to go through all of these green areas, but it never hits these return false statements, right? So we have a function here for which we don't have a test for this outcome, or this outcome, or this outcome, or an exception. And if we look at the documentation, it says, throws exception, and it says always returns an indexed array. So documentation is wrong. We've just performed some analysis. The point here is we could create another data set that causes it to hit that return false. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll leave that as an exercise for whoever wants to go do it. But let's go back to post-stream reader again. So post-stream reader has these absurdly high crap numbers. 30 is sort of generally considered to be high. As you can see, this is much higher than that. I would say that in Drupal, a crap number of like 100 or plus or whatever is probably allowable. But this is pretty high. Let's look at readline. So here's readline. whoops, let me show you. It's 168 lines of executable code that does something. We're not sure what, because we're all naive about this. We're performing an analysis in order to try to come up with remember? Trying to perform an analysis to come up with an expectation so that we can write a test. So here's readline. It's got some documentation. We can learn about that. Reads a line from the PO stream and stores data internally is what it says. And then it goes into a bunch of implementation details like expands this current item based on the new data for the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, eyes glaze over. And then return false if an error was logged, null otherwise, which kind of creeps me out, but that's okay. And then just on and on and on with this parser. It reads in data from a file, line by line, figures out, manages the state machine, figures out if there's an error with any given line, etc. It has a lot of responsibilities and 168 lines of code. It should not be called readline. It should be called do everything. But that's okay. No judgment here. Just trying to do an analysis so that we can maintain this. So we see here that it's a private function, which is why I chose it, because it's only used in this class because it's private. Everyone get that? So somewhere in this class it's going to be called. We're going to call it read line. And here's where it gets read, read item. Or where it gets used, where it gets called is read item. And that implements an interface. It looks like we deal with this last item. So the only thing this method does is try to open a file and read it over and over and over again for each line, and then returns last item. So that it looks like last item is something that we can check for. This is right, we can figure out what last item is, and we can begin to create expectations. So where is it? Last item. It's a PO item. So it looks like if we don't want to set up any mocking or anything like that under PHPUnit, which we don't want to do at this point, the best way to deal with this, the best way to understand this, doink, is we're going to call, expectations. Let's take some notes here with this little tiny text. So we're going to call read item, which we'll call read line, and return a PO item. All right, that seems like a reasonable analysis at this point. Remember, we don't know anything about it. We're just doing some discovery here. So yeah, what am I doing on time? Pretty good. So how do we call read line or read item? How does that work? Because it looks like it has a lot of weird dependencies that we don't quite understand. We can't just inject a dependency in there. We have to jump through some hoops. Let's go over to NetBeans. Pretend you didn't see that. That's my test that I'm about to write. Let's go look for PO stream reader. Let's find it. I'm guessing that that's hard to read for everybody. Maybe that'll be better. So, still tiny here, but bigger there. So file translate, I'm just going to short circuit this process a little bit. Hey look, file translate has a public static function called files to array, which gets a PostStream reader, and then we discover some of the dependencies and like what it needs to do before we can actually check our analysis. And so we've made an analysis, now we have to find out how to check it. So here's a pattern for reading in a PO file. I'm just going to copy paste that in here, although that sucks. Right? So now we know that we can set a URI to a file. We can set a language code. We can open the file based on the language code, and then write items, which, trust me, more short-circuiting. It returns the PO item if it's there. Exciting. So here's the test that does that was going to be the live demo test thing that I talked about it, but no, it's typed out. Fooled you. So yeah, so we're using VFS Stream to provide a PO file. This is a unit test in PHPUnit using the unit test case from Drupal and the special cases for Drupal there. In Drupal 8, we also have VFS Stream, which allows you to create a virtual file system that's in memory. So you define an array that represents a file system, and then you test file accessors and whatever against that array instead of an actual file system, which means you don't have to actually write out files or manage them or whatever. You just do this with a big old array. So this is a big string that looks like a PO file. And I just copy pasted this off of a Linux forum somewhere. Nothing special. Because I want to find out if I make a new PostStream reader and I set the URI to the VFS stream, and then I open it, right? And then I read or read item. I can assert if this is an instance of a PO item, because that is our expectation, which is now tiny. Right? Our expectation. We did analysis. Let's go back here. We did analysis. We created expectations. Now we are testing our expectations against the code rather than testing the code against anything. We are testing our expectations. The whole thing, the whole process here, thing I'm trying to get across. And yeah, so let's run that test. It's exciting. So, under, fine, PHPUnit, filter this test only. This better pass. So, it does. Yay. So, we've tested against our expectations. Our expectations turned out to be right. Let's pretend that we wanted this to be assert. Is there an assert not instance of? I can't remember. Whatever. Assert not instance of? I guess not. So yeah. Okay, done. No. So let's go back here and perform some more analysis, because we all love doing analysis. I can tell by the vibe of the room. Everyone wants to stare at this report some more. So yeah, let's look at the code coverage for read line previously, right? So here's our coverage. Nothing. One of the reasons I chose it, because it's going to be night and day. Right, so nothing. But we can go through now that we have kind of a basic understanding of how this works. We can make a prediction about what lines will be covered. And clearly these top few lines are going to be covered because they don't have any logic around them. There's a point at which we're not going to be finished because we're not finished. And yeah, we have more than 0 lines, so at some point we're going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. We're always going to make the log vars for array, for URI, and line. This is used for the error reporting. By the way, the errors are stored in a private property of this class that doesn't have an accessor. So yeah, we can just zoom on down, boop, 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 boop. Check it out. Let's find something that likely won't be covered. We don't have any tags here for this message stir with an open square bracket in our data, which we can look at here. Here's our data. No message. We have these tags like message stir, which mean something. I don't know what they mean. You don't know what they mean. We're trying to figure out what the code does. So, so this looks like an area that probably won't be covered. So all the way down from 398 to, I don't know, 440 or something probably won't be covered. That's a guess based on my analysis and expectation. Let's see if that's right. Look, I already did it. So here's post stream reader. Read line. It's green because we ran the tests. We had some data. The data covered these different lines. You can see a little hover thing if I make it bigger. But there's our test that we just wrote. Let's go down to 398. And look, we hit that line and then nothing after that because we don't have this data. So the relationship between coverage and the test, depending on the data that goes through, that we pass in, depends on the dependencies, hence the use of the word depend, and so forth. So yay, that's a metric right there. Thumbs up, I got it. Almost like I rehearsed this talk. Yeah. So let's go back to the talk, because that's pretty much the demo. So we're going to revisit our questions again. So the assignment 1 was, what's the main project risk? And we determined through using numbers and actual data and like stuff that we have on hand to figure out the best possible answer to that question, post-stream reader's readline method. So assignment 2, how do we mitigate the risk? We write some tests with eyes towards coverage, because now we have, if we used CRAP to measure our risk. So let's look at CRAP again. Just by writing that one test, I have lowered the CRAP from, what was it, 5070 or something? 5402 down to 2268. So yay, the system works. And readline now has a quarter. So we have approximately 40% line coverage, but that leads to a much lower risk of change per anything in that method, because we now have tests that will be changed, that will conceivably pass or fail based on any change we make. Right? So yay, green lines are good. So that's how we can mitigate the risk without changing the code. And we asked if we should replace this component, which again, not really advocating for that, but we're more able to evaluate it because we now have an understanding of what's complex in it and what kind of changes we might have to make in order to make it more maintainable versus some other code that someone else already wrote tests for. So if we decide, here we go, if we decide to replace it, we know why we're doing that. If we decide to keep it, we have tests because we already wrote some. And if we want to make it more performant, we have a clue as to where to start because we performed analysis. We can already think about it. So that's basically my talk. So if there's any questions about any of the mumbo jumbo that I've just shoved in your ear, anyone, any thoughts, concerns? People like to do code analysis? Yes?
So that coverage report that you did just now, is that where D8 is right now? Is that ahead?
This is, I did this last night. I made the coverage report last night. Yeah. So, but this is D8, by the way, yes. I don't think I mentioned that. This is Drupal 8 that we're looking at here. Isn't it exciting?
I can see, because I mean, obviously, that was the first time I've seen a test coverage report for D8, and I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff. Is there an issue, like a meta issue to write all the test coverage, more test coverage?
There have been some, but this doesn't talk about simple tests. I should have mentioned that before. So we have simple we have basically 2 big testing systems, actually 3 now because Behat's in core. So we have this will only show you what's covered by unit tests, PHPUnit based tests, whereas simple test gives you a whole bunch of information about what's still working, but it doesn't. You can't really perform this kind of analysis because it's not like a strictly a unit test. You can't really say that, you know, like a simple test might look at a web page, like look at the front page and see if you have specific blocks on it or something. That doesn't cover a unit of code. That covers all of Drupal as of how it works and your integration of your code or your block or whatever into the whole system. So it's not really, it doesn't really tell you like by line of code what is actually problematic.
What you're saying is, while we have PHPUnit in D8 now, we're still depending on simple tests, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's still there.
When the test bot runs, when you submit a patch, it's still all the simple tests.
Well, it's all of the tests. So simple test, when you run, if you, here, well, should I try this? If you look at, so here we have, let's see if this is working. No, we shouldn't try that. Yeah, so the simple test module will actually scan for PHPUnit tests and then run them, and it'll show you the result of them, I think. Run tests.sh, the shell script, which is not actually a shell script, but a PHP script, will do the same thing and will show you the results. And then you can also do like I did here, which for PHPUnit, you can just, you know, vendor bind PHPUnit. But yeah, so in D8 we have, and now we've added bhat, and I'm not sure exactly how that integrates. I haven't looked at that. And we just had an excellent talk about PHP spec, which I hope would be integrated somehow because it's pretty awesome. But there you go. I don't know what else to say. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned, what was it? When you're looking at the crap score, 30, but then you mentioned 100 for Drupal as like to be low. Where did you come up with, like, is there a number you should look? I got to get under this crap score, and now I feel good about myself.
Yeah. So the question is like, how do you choose which crap score is the high one? And it's really kind of arbitrary. I mean, by default, it will show you. It uses, where is it? Down, where is it? Up here somewhere. Well, you can, per project, you can set that in PHPUnit. You can say, like at the top level in the PHPUnit config file, you can say this is high and this is low, and you can do it however you want to. It's just a question of like, again, like we're trying to maintain this, so numbers above like 100 or above 1,000 or whatever are all equally scary, and you can just sort of compare like, well, this scary number is bigger than this scary number. It isn't necessarily like that 30 is correct or 100 is correct. It's just that as a project you can say we're shooting for 30 or we're shooting for 100 or whatever. And that just gives you a metric, because again, we need to establish risk metrics, change risk metrics.
And as far as looking at other, you know, someone looking into this who's newer, what's like a very good PHP project to look at that would be better than what Drupal 8 is right now? Like Symfony, I would think, right?
In order to learn about PHPUnit?
Well, just to compare, I guess, how maybe another project did a certain type of testing or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can look at any of them and figure it out. I mean, trying to think of one that, I mean, looking at the PHPUnit project is actually really interesting. You learn a lot about PHP, but right, I mean, you can just grab any project that you can find and run run a coverage report like this and try to learn something and just explore, because it's not really all that hard to do, right? It's just a command line away. So yeah, I don't know which specific one to tell you. Although Drupal is interesting because you have a lot of sort of gaps, and you have where you could write tests. Like if you want to learn to write tests, hop in. I suggest using the this components namespace if you want to experiment, because it's not mission critical really or anything, and your maintainers can safely ignore you if they need to, right? So, but yeah, so does that answer your question? Sort of, I guess.
Can you go back to the Git? I see it's generated by the specific where you got the project that's generating it.
This which what?
I think it says generated down at the bottom.
Oh.
Like, I just want to be sure I got the right GitHub.
Generated by code coverage, but the way you do it is you're just using PHPUnit. So you say enter find PHPUnit, and then you offer it coverage HTML, and then you tell it where to store it. It has a specific component for generating this, but it's included with PHPUnit generally when you require it, using Composer or whatever. And then you could there's like an XML one, and there's like a Clover one, and you can do it for PHP and JSON and whatever your project needs. So, anybody else? Thoughts, concerns? Tell me I'm an idiot. Nobody?
What's your present working directory? Like, where are you running this command at?
Well, you can see right here, core. So this is Drupal. Drupal 8 looks like this. And currently, you say cd core, because that's where there is so you look in there, and it has it has its own composer.json file, and it has its own vendor hierarchy, which is where we're storing all that stuff in Drupal 8. Resisting urge to do composer rant. But anyway, so anyone else?
Just want to put a call out. We are trying to transition from simple test to PHPUnit, so please write unit tests.
Oh, okay. So Mr. Krell himself says we're trying to transition away from simple test because there was one issue where, like, I think it was Sun said we should not be in the business of maintaining a testing regime or whatever, a testing framework. Yeah, well, whatever. And so, so yeah.
All of these things that list terrible test coverage, especially in component, please add those. Yes, they will get committed.
Okay, I'm giving the wrong impression, I suppose. So.
It's not the highest priority right now, but we will commit test coverage.
So Larry, you're saying if you work on and help to write these tests, they'll get into core.
It's not a critical issue at the moment,
not
but we will commit patches that improve test coverage.
Okay.
So yes, please, right.
Actually, I guess that is really the only thing you could, like, if you're right now in beta or RC, that like, hi, I'm new. What should I do? Maybe write a unit test.
Especially in component, since that code is by design a lot more decoupled from everything else.
Right, yeah.
That should be some of the easiest to write tests for in the code base right now. So
exactly.
Please do so.
There you go. There are some metas. You should search for them. But yeah. Anyone else?
Have you ever put in a process where something won't deploy when you did, like, say you use continuous integration, run, put this in front of it actually deploying? So, like, if coverage is below a certain amount, it actually won't deploy the code, thus forcing the team to write tests before it actually gets in there?
That would be hard ass, and I would love to see that somewhere. But the question is, like, is coverage a test itself? That was going to prevent deployment or come back at continuous integration or whatever. And sure, go for it, add it in there. I'm not sure exactly how to make that happen, but there's got to be a way. Do some analysis. So like you would, instead of outputting an HTML, you would output XML or JSON or something, and then it would be able to perform analysis of that. I don't know the tool chain for that.
Jenkins could parse that and fail.
Yeah, okay.
Totally do that.
So Jenkins or whatever CI tool you got? Anybody? You're just trusting. Yeah. Anybody else?
I
Okay.
have a question. So the test that you wrote here in the demo,
Right?
it improves the craft score X amount. And so those lines that turn green, can you state with confidence that that is good tested code? Or should there be other tests you run to make sure that what's happening on those green lines is happening as you expect?
Well, see, that's the best question of all, because this test only tests an outcome, like if I feed in this, do I get this? And it doesn't test, like, right? So if you're going through here, like let's say I want to make sure, where is it? Let's say I want to make sure, that was weird. Wow, big. What the hell is going on? So, like let's say we know that we want to hit, like let's say we're, let's say we're making sure that we are checking this, whatever this is, which is the first line might come with an UTF-8 BOM, which should be removed, okay? Whatever that is, we feed in a test, like we know that we need to test that. So we're gonna make another test that says, on the line 0, have this thing, so that we can verify that that happens, right? I don't know how we do that on the, because it's gonna parse the whole line and we don't know for sure that it's going to remove that unless there's some way we can test later. But the point is, you're gonna make another test specifically for that thing that you're trying to test. This, the story here with this talk is that we, not the community shout-outs, that we are we're just given a pile of code and we've got to try to understand it. What you're talking about is, I know a specific behavior, I need to write a specific test that covers that, so that we can make sure that that doesn't creep its way back in. So, there you go. Anyone else? All right, it looks like I've thoroughly confused everybody. So, there you go. That was my talk. Thank you very much. So now I have to hit this button.